you're seeing happening now, what is unfolding now, is the culmination of the absolute degradation of our political spheres, our media spheres, over a course of many years, okay? This is the culmination of that. This is what we get. This is the cost of that. This is the cost of everybody being ignorant. This is the cost of nobody speaking out when the mainstream media have been publishing provable falsehoods at every single juncture of every single conflict for decades. And they've been allowed to get away with it. And our politicians have been allowed to lie on the floor of Congress, in the House of Commons, at the United Nations, to stand up there and lie to the world. And they're doing it over and over and over again. So we just spent 2 years being gaslit by our governments about a, quote, global pandemic, and being made to be locked in our homes, deprived of work. They have inflated our currency, devalued our currency by basically just printing money and literally throwing it out the window to their friends to pay for obscene amounts of vaccine stocks and PPE and furlough money and paying businesses and well-connected companies with COVID relief and so forth. And now we're seeing the results of this. It's hyperinflation. That's a direct result of this free-for-all for the last 2 years, including your fuel prices and everything else. Supply chain, quote, disruptions. This didn't happen on its own. This wasn't an act of God. This was a man-made series of events, okay? We've just endured 2 years of this. 2 years of being told, oh, you have to take an experimental pharmaceutical product or you're not gonna be able to have a job. You can't earn money. You can't go into shop or a restaurant. You can't travel. The same government and media who engineered this ridiculous, unnecessary, overblown, hysterical situation that went global for the last 2 years. These same politicians, these same mainstream media outlets are now telling you that Russia is your enemy and you need to hate Russia, you need to punish Russians, you need to destroy the economy of that country and teach them a lesson. Why? What did Russia do to America? There's pundits coming every 2 seconds onto US mainstream media, and they're saying, we need to punish the Russians. They mean us harm. Russia is our enemy. What has Russia ever done to the United States of America? What? Nothing. Nothing. What has the United States of America and its NATO allies done to Russia? They've attempted to destroy their economy, destabilize their government, violate NATO promises that were made by numerous Western leaders over a course of many years that NATO would not move eastward and encircle Russia and therefore threaten its own national security interests. And we're told that Russia has done us harm. We've been told that Russia interfered with our elections, that Russia elected Donald Trump. More than half of the people in the United States of America believe that Russia interfered in the 2016 elections. They've been conditioned to hate the Russians and everything about Russians, and Vladimir Putin did this and Vladimir Putin did that. 100% lies. And Russia did not hack the DNC. There's no evidence for that either. And the list goes on and on. All fabrications. It's all coming out in the wash now. Hillary Clinton herself fabricated evidence that Donald Trump was linked to a Russian bank. The Durham report, the evidence is there. Is the media talking about it? No, there's a convenient distraction underway to gaslight everybody. It was all made up, it was fake, it was political, it was designed to prepare you for what you're seeing now. The West has baited Russia, they've sanctioned them, They've overthrown governments in their neighboring countries, like Ukraine. And they want you to think that, no, don't forget about all that context. Forget about the history. Forget about the fact that we have armed, trained, and backed neo-Nazi, far-right paramilitary militias and our allies in Ukraine. This is what the government is upset about. And 14,000 people have died in the Donbass, that's Donetsk and Lugansk in eastern Ukraine, in a very bloody civil war since 2014. After the coup, that initiated a civil war. And then you have an ethnic Russian enclave in the east being persecuted. The military's been deployed to attack them. They called them all terrorists. 4 million people in the Donbass, and they've been depersoned and canceled by the Western media. This is what the Minsk peace process was for. The UN passed a resolution 2202, and everybody agreed to pursue the Minsk peace accords. The job of Germany and France was, they had only one job, is to get Kiev and the government in Ukraine to ratify the Minsk accords. 7 years, and they did nothing. They dragged their heels, and of course, Kiev's position was openly that we won't do this. Did you ever hear about that in the Western media? Did you ever hear a word about that? No. Have you heard all of the grandstanding politicians? Have they even mentioned this? No. This was the UN mandate. Everybody's turned their back on it. Why? And now they're blaming Russia for somehow failing in the Minsk peace process. That's the opposite of what happened. So our politicians are standing up and lying to our face right now. So from Russia's point of view, the world has abandoned the United Nations resolution. They've abandoned the human rights atrocities in the Donbass. 14,000 dead soldiers, mostly civilians, hundreds of children, civilians being shelled by the Ukrainian army, and radical militias. Is that not a human rights violation? Is that not a crime against humanity? Taking out electrical grids, taking out the water supply, blockading food deliveries. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? This is exactly what the United States, its allies, and Saudi Arabia and the UAE have been doing in Yemen for the last 7 years. Have you seen any outrage in the Western media about this? No, it's genocide. It's genocide in Yemen. It's attempted genocide in eastern Ukraine. It's the same thing that has been done to the Palestinians. It's the same thing that our governments have been trying to do to the country of Syria. And you see a familiar pattern developing here. And what's our reaction to that? We sanction them. We sanction Syria. Why? For defending their country against thousands and thousands of radical Islamist, jihadist, terrorist fighters armed by the United States and its allies, including the UK, including France, and the list goes on. Channeling weapons into Syria to create a long, protracted civil war. Does that sound familiar? What's happening in Ukraine now? Everybody's announcing they're sending weapons into Ukraine. The president of Ukraine, a comedian, an actor who played the president on a sitcom 2 years ago, decided to run for president as a protest move, as a joke. He ends up getting elected. What does that tell you about the political state and the state of society in a country like Ukraine? It's far from serious in terms of how things are being managed, even at a government level. So you've got a comedian who's president calling on mercenaries from around the world to come and fight against the Russians, passing out guns to civilians. After getting billions of dollars in military aid from the United States and NATO member states, our best special forces, training and advising the Ukrainian forces. If that was the case, why does they need to go and announce to anybody and everybody just to show up and come and join and fight? Not a very good look. It's not a serious government. It never was. And what kind of a government would deploy the full force of its military to attack an ethnic group in the east of its country because of ethnic reasons or whatever the reasons are? At that point, it's a failed government. It's a failed state. It came to power in a violent coup in 2014. The current regime, this President Zelensky, Poroshenko, Yatsenyuk, etc., came to power in a violent coup backed by the United States of America. This is historical fact. It was engineered. The evidence is overwhelming. Everybody who's looked at this knows that. Yet you won't hear this mentioned once by anyone in our mainstream media right now. No politician will dare to even utter that. And the President of the United States, Joe Biden, was vice president at the time, and he and his family made a fortune out of the corruption in Ukraine. They took advantage of this corrupt environment and they padded their own pockets. Joe Biden was effectively running a racket. He threatened the government that they wouldn't get over $1 billion in loan guarantees unless they fired the prosecutor that was investigating his son. Now, what level of corruption is this? It has never been seen before. And it's done out in the open. How is this allowed to happen? Because our mainstream media have made a concerted decision not to pursue certain stories for partisan reasons. That is a level of corruption that we have never seen before. When you have a press that partisan, then the press is dysfunctional. It no longer fulfills its public service. It is no longer the fourth estate. It is therefore redundant. It is therefore an accessory to any of the high crimes that we're witnessing now.